If a website ever asks you these questions, don't do what she did. Once there was a girl named Masha who heard that there's a new service that gives everyone free internet access, so she decided to use it, but this would lead to something horrifying for Masha and her family. After she connected to this internet service, a web page popped up asking her to register some information, but the questions were oddly personal. It asked, what's your usual mode of transportation? With a photo of a bus, a boat, a train, and a plane. Masha took her bike to school every day, so she clicked on the train instead. But the next day, the local news showed that there was a horrific train crash that killed everyone on board. Masha thought that this was a coincidence, but soon she'd realize that she made a deadly mistake. Later, she needed to use the internet again, so she logged back in. This time it asked, what kind of home do you live in? Along with 4 different pictures of different types of homes. She clicked apartment even though her and her family lived in a house. And the next day, the apartment building near her school burned down. The police suspected arson. Then she went back to the internet server one last time, but this time it showed a photo of her mother, father, sister, and herself with the question, who is your favorite family member?
If you receive a creepy tea party invitation in your mailbox, throw it out right away and don't attend the party. There's a legend about this girl who received a strange invitation. It was sealed with wax, it looked super old, but it didn't say who it was from. It gave an address, a time, and a dress code. But the creepiest part about it is that at the very bottom of the invitation it said, no +1s allowed, arrive unattended. Obviously her parents were really sketched out and they told her not to go to this place and to throw out the invitation right away. But the next day her parents went into her bedroom and she was nowhere to be seen. They saw the invitation lying open on her bed and they knew that she had gone. Now after this she was never seen again. And when her family went to the address the tea party was said to be, they arrived at an abandoned old building. It was then found out that multiple people had gone missing that month after receiving a strange tea party invitation.
The last one completely blew my mind. There exists a plankton called dinoflagellates that if you consume it, will reverse your sense of hot and cold, and it can last for years. Scientists recently discovered some sharks living in an active volcano, but they can't get in to study them because, well, it's a volcano and it's too hot. In 1972, Vesna Vulovic fell out of a plane at 33,000 feet, no parachute, and lived. Sour Patch Kids and Swedish Fish are made by the same manufacturer, and in fact, the red Sour Patch Kid is literally a Swedish fish, except with sour sugar on it. The only people that know how to open the United States president's car doors are the Secret Service.
There is a creepy lost episode of Barney that a father swears he caught his kids watching. One day he was looking at the TV guide when he saw that it said a lost episode of Barney was going to air at 7 p.m. He asked his kids if they wanted to watch and they said yes. They all sat down to watch it and the theme song started playing, but something wasn't right about it. It almost sounded like the song was being whispered. The episode started as it usually did, the kids holding the Barney doll that suddenly comes to life. But when Barney started talking, he sounded slightly weird. It sounded like 2 people were talking at once. His normal voice and one that sounded darker and scarier. And suddenly he said,
"Hi kids, today I'm going to talk to you about death."
So one of the kids asked him,
"Barney, what's death?"
He then chuckled and said,
"This is."
With his face suddenly turning angry, his teeth growing long, and then he eats the child. And then he proceeds to chase all the other children around trying to eat them throughout the rest of the episode. And then at the very end of the episode, he sang the I Love You song as if nothing happened.
Do you know the dark origins behind the fairy tales we all grew up hearing? In this series, I'm gonna draw each fairy tale and tell you the original scary stories they were based on. First, we have the Grimm's version of Snow White. Now, we all know how the story begins. The evil queen was jealous of Snow White's beauty, so she banished her into the woods. But the evil queen actually wanted to eat Snow White's liver and lungs with salt and pepper. The huntsman spared her and gave a boar's liver and lungs to the queen, which she eats. But the darkest part, which you might not know about, is how Snow White actually got revenge. Snow White and the prince got married and they invited the evil queen, or should I say tricked the evil queen into attending because they knew that she'd feel jealous enough to do it. And the evil queen actually fell for it. She arrived at Snow White and the prince's wedding only to find out that they put a pair of iron shoes into burning coals until it heated up and glowed bright red. Then they placed it in front of the evil queen and made her wear those shoes until she danced to her death.
So yesterday, me and my wife were just chilling on the couch, and all of a sudden I get a text message from my neighbor John. So I opened the text message and it was so disgusting, I wrote it down so I can read it to you guys. This is what it said. "Hey Andreas, it's your neighbor John, and I've been feeling so guilty lately that I haven't been able to sleep, and I think it's time to confess. I've been helping myself to your wife when you're at work, probably more than you do. It's so incredible and so fun, and I haven't been able to contain myself. Sometimes it goes on for hours. I know it's no excuse, but I don't get any at my house. Anyway, I apologize and it won't happen again." So I read the message to my wife and I look at her and I go, "You are a disgusting, cheating tramp. I never want to see you again in my life. I want a divorce, and you are nasty, you are grimy, you are disgusting. I don't want to see you again. So right before my wife went to speak, I get another text message from John. So I open the message, it says, shit, I really hate autocorrect. I meant to say Wi-Fi. When my grandfather was younger, he was convicted of a crime that he didn't do, and the judge sentenced him to death row. But when it came day to kill my grandfather talked his way out of the whole situation. So when execution day came for my grandfather, there was actually 2 guys in front of him who were going to be killed first. So the guards asked the first guy who was going to be killed, they said, what do you want as your last meal? The guy says, oh, I want a big juicy steak. So they give him the steak, he eats it, and then after he eats it, the guards just kill him immediately. So the guards ask the same question to the second guy getting executed. They say, what do you want as your last meal? The guy says, oh, I want a big lobster. So they give him the lobster, he eats it, and once he eats it, they kill him. So then it came my grandfather's turn to be executed, and they ask him, what do you want to eat as your last meal? My grandfather looks at the guards and goes, I want a big bowl of strawberries. The guards look at him and go, strawberries? Those are out of season. So then my grandfather goes, don't worry about it. I don't mind waiting at all.
Can you solve this mystery? This is the story of 6 friends who went to the beach together, but something strange happened. One of their friends decided to dive into the water, then went missing. But things are not as simple as they seem. All the clues to what really happened are hidden in what I'm about to say. So these 6 friends went to the beach, and one of them decided it'd be fun to go cliff diving. Let's call him Tom. Tom dove into the water first while all of his other friends watched. Then about half a minute later, when Tom still hadn't come up, his 5 remaining friends followed. But still, even after everyone else came back up and swam to the shore, Tom was still nowhere to be seen. The 5 remaining friends thought the worst must have happened, so they left and tried to move on with their lives, until the 1-year anniversary of Tom's disappearance. They went back to the same beach to commemorate him. That's when Tom was right there, standing by the water. But something wasn't right. In front of him, right at the edge of the water, were 5 crosses. What really happened here? Can you solve this mystery?
This is why you should never play hide and seek. A mom decided to play hide and seek with her 2 kids. The mom began counting, ready or not, here I come. She begins searching the downstairs kitchen because she knows that they hide there every single time. As she's walking to the kitchen, she starts saying, I wonder where they are. She looks under the table and sees they aren't there, which is kind of odd. She knew they were too scared to go into the basement alone, but she decided to check anyway. They weren't there either. She began to panic. The mom then says, Jordan, Casey, come out now, mommy's not playing anymore. There was no answer. Panic really begins to set in. She decides to call 911 and reaches an operator. She tells the operator what's wrong, and the operator sends an officer to her house. Once the officer arrives, he says, don't worry, we will find them. As she's sitting in the living room, she hears giggling and laughing and hears a closet door slam upstairs. She sprints upstairs and says, Jordan, Casey, you worried me sick. She opened the closet door and nobody was there. While all of this is going on, she hears the doorbell ring. She runs downstairs and finds the officer holding Jordan and Casey. The officer says, they were hiding in the shed out back. Then Jordan looks at mommy and says, why were you telling us to stay in the
Here is another abandoned Disney park that you're not allowed to go near. This was called River County Water Park, and it first opened back in 1976. The park was filled with excited families and squealing children speeding down water slides. It was complete with rocks and man-made boulders you can jump off of, and in the first year it opened, it had around 4,700 guests per day. In 1982, a 14-year-old boy from North Dakota drowned in the resort after going down Whoop and Holler water slide. There were no signs saying how deep the water was, which is so dangerous, and lifeguards that worked there came forward and said that dozens of people had to be rescued from that slide each day. And then in 1989, a 13-year-old boy ended up drowning in the park. So since then, the resort has been left to rot, filled with overgrown moss, abandoned rusty water slides covered in vines. No one has stepped foot inside ever since.
Here's the story of Zoe Alexander, the aggressive Pink impersonator from The X Factor. Zoe used to work as a Pink tribute artist, which she obviously mentioned on her application for the show. When she was emailing with producers, because it's this whole long process, they asked her to send in 5 songs she would sing on the show. None of the ones she sent were by Pink. The producer wrote her back and told her that she should sing a Pink song, and it was very clear the only way she would be allowed to come on the show was if she sang a Pink song. When she got there, interviewers kept asking her these really weird specific questions about Pink. They had her get there at 6 a.m., hours before she actually had to be there, and everyone just kept mentioning Pink to her when she wanted to be Zoe. And when the judges told her she shouldn't have sang a Pink song, she realized she'd been set up. When they let her sing a second song, they played the track in the wrong key and turned off the stage speakers so she couldn't hear the music and would sound bad. And what we saw was a complete mental breakdown as she realized the only reason she was ever brought on the show was to become a laughingstock.
The origin of Thanksgiving actually has a really dark history. American Americans generally believe that Thanksgiving comes from the 1621 Harvest Feast. This was a feast involving the Wampanoag tribe and the Pilgrims. But here's the thing, it wasn't until 1863 that this event was declared a national holiday. And you can thank Abraham Lincoln for that. So where does it get dark? Well, you're about to find out. The first declared celebration of Thanksgiving actually happened in 1637. See, the Pilgrims found the body of a white man on a boat. They assumed that they knew who the killers were, and without any evidence that the Pequot village was the cause of this death, they decided to just slaughter all of them because of the assumption that they had something to do with it. 700 men, women, and children lost their lives in cold blood. And the very next day, the governor declared as Thanksgiving because they were thanking God for the victory of wiping out the village. This celebration of Thanksgiving was celebrated for the next 100 years. So even though the Thanksgiving that we celebrate today predates that event, technically the first Thanksgiving was a celebration.
This sounds totally made up until you listen to the police report. In the early 90s, a teenage girl started to see these shadowy figures that would come into a room at night and crawl all around her room and even grab at her legs. At the same time, her health began to rapidly deteriorate, which ultimately led to her death, which doctors never understood. A few days after her death, her sister woke up to a whistling sound and saw a creature crawling around her room with no face. The same night, her mom was ripped out of bed by someone. The father calls the police, who come over, they search the house, they don't find anything, it's all quiet. As they're about to leave, they hear something. Horrifying screams coming out of the bedroom. They run inside, no one's in there, but there are these huge gashes on the wall that were not there before. The police get out of there. In the police report that was filed immediately after this house call, the chief inspector and the 3 officers that were there that night swear they saw and heard the same things as the family, which means the police officially believed that the house was haunted. The more you think about how this true story ends, the creepier it gets. In 2015, a college student was renting the basement apartment of his friend's house. One weekend, his basement roommates take off for the night, so he decides to use that time to get some homework done distraction-free. But as soon as he sits down to do his work, his friend upstairs and his family starts making all this noise, moving furniture around, shuffling feet. It's impossible to focus, so he picks up his phone and he texts his friend. "You guys sound like you're really having a good time up there. I'm not really getting anything done. Can I come up?" And his buddy says, "No one is home. We went to Wisconsin for the weekend." Terrified, he runs out the side door to get a look in the window to see who's making all the noise. All the lights are off in the house. There's not a single car in the driveway. He had been home alone the whole time.
So your birth month actually has a huge effect on who you become as a person and the things that could possibly happen to you. And this is part 3 of what that means. September babies tend to be the highest achievers in school, but this is only because they're the oldest in their class. October babies. You're more than likely gonna live the longest out of everybody here. There are more serial killers born in November than any other month, which is absolutely terrifying because there's a ton of kids born in November because Valentine's Day was only 9 months ago. Kids born in December probably want something really cool, like June CEOs or maybe November serial killers, but you're more than likely just gonna be a left-handed dentist, so make sure.
If you scare easily, swipe on. In 1989, a woman started hearing strange banging sounds in her walls and in the ceiling. And then one night, the crawl space to her attic was open, so she went to go have a look. When she's just feet away, an old man suddenly appears in the crawl space and looks her dead in the eye before vanishing. There was nobody else in the house. Worried no one's going to take her seriously over an apparent ghost in her house, she ends up calling a paranormal investigator. When the paranormal crew arrived, they were actually very skeptical until they heard loud banging in the attic and they decided to go up and have a look. As soon as the 2 men get up into the attic, one of them screams and suddenly disappears. The other, who didn't have a flashlight, starts using the flash on his camera to illuminate the attic. And he takes one of the most famous pictures in paranormal history. His partner, who was in total shock, had been lifted off the ground and tied to one of the beams. That was the last night the woman ever stayed in the house. However, it's still being rented out today, but nobody stays longer than 1 or 2 months. I was not ready for the ending to this one. In the early 2010s, 2 15-year-old friends were camping at a state forest with their families. One night, the friends decide they want to go explore the woods around their campsite, but they want to see how far they can get without using a flashlight. A little ways into their trip, they start to hear some whispering behind them, and they quickly turn around, pull out their flashlights, and start looking for what was making the sound. After a short search, they don't find anything, and so even though they're a little bit freaked out, they decide to put their flashlights away and carry on into the woods. After a little while, they start to hear the whispering again. So they pull out their flashlights. Now they're determined to find out what the heck is making this sound. They do a very thorough search, they don't find anything, and at this point, they're too freaked out and they decide to start heading back. As they start retracing their steps, they see what was making the sound. A woman comes out from behind a tree, crawling towards them, muttering random words. She sees them, stands up, and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking for my campsite. They're half mile."
I made my teacher cry. Story time. When I was in 2nd grade, I had this teacher and she was the devil, and we're gonna name her Miss Jackson. And the reason I call her a devil is because she would say really mean things to me to my face. She would be like, "Ty, stop talking like that. You sound like a little girl." Or, "Your favorite color can't be pink. You have to choose one of the boy colors." And since I was so young, I didn't understand how serious these things were, and I didn't know I can get her in trouble. And I would go home sad like every single day. Eventually, my mom noticed and she asked me what was wrong. So I told her some of the things that Miss Jackson would say to me, and my mom was mad. And my mom was like, "The next time she says something to you, say something rude back, and if you get in trouble, I'll handle her from there." So I was like, okay, I'll do it. Now, Miss Jackson was a heavy lady, so I knew if I said something rude to her, it would be about her weight. Though we don't body shame around here. We don't do that, okay? So I'm in school eating lunch with my friends who happen to be girls. And Miss Jackson comes up to me and she's like, "Shouldn't you be eating with the boys?" So I looked at her and I was like, "Shouldn't you be eating a salad?" And the lunchroom started laughing and then she started crying.